Hey guys, I'm recording this on Monday, June 15th. Wow, what a historical times we live in. Um, I just have to comment on the great SpaceX IPO. It sort of reminds me of the great merger between AOL and Time Warner, which I personally thought was madness. As why would you trade a real company for a company that's on its last legs, which was basically what happened when Time Warner sold itself to AOL, um, basically gave itself away in exchange for some magic beans, which was AOL stock. And you can look at the AOL stock chart and see what happened to its price. And in fact, its very existence. But this is different. But I know there are fans out there, but this is crazy town to a degree that we have never seen before. And let me explain just some basic details that seem to be being left out of everything. And this is a good lesson in business. Bottom line, Elon Musk, you might love him, you might hate him, you might not care about him, but Elon Musk just did something absolutely extraordinary. He created himself a credit card with a $1 trillion balance on it. And I'm not exaggerating. That's exactly what he just did. Would I do that? I don't know. If someone said I could borrow $1 trillion and not have to worry about paying it back. Um, I don't know. I might be tempted. Obviously, he had to do a lot of work and a lot of storytelling to get himself into that place, but that's what he's done. So let me explain what happened. So they had this IPO. They sold a tiny fraction of the shares, lot smaller percentage than normal. Um, Demand is super high. People bid it up to the moon. And then you take the share price and the shares that were sold, not the IPO, and then you multiply it by actually how many shares the company has total. And I believe it comes to over $2 trillion. Dollars. It might be more, it might be less. So now, out of thin air, you got to grasp this. I know most of us are simple-minded, me included. I had to study to understand this. Most of us make a dollar and then we put it in the bank. Like we don't run crazy financial scams on the planet. I know the fans are going to be screaming now. We make our money the old-fashioned way, but there's other ways to make money. And one way to make money is to get somebody to give you a $1 trillion credit card that you don't have to worry about paying back. And by the way, borrowed money is tax-free. And when you borrow money from somebody and you put up collateral, generally your only risk is the collateral you put up. So if I say, hey, lend me $1 billion, because that's the era that we're living in, on my used car that's worth 1,200, and you're foolish enough to lend me $1 billion, I can say, God, I can't pay. You're going to get my collateral. So that's what Elon Musk has done. So with the help of the ever ethical Wall Street people, especially Goldman Sachs, the most ethical company that ever was, they have created out of thin air a company that has no profits, that is on paper worth, we'll call it $2 trillion. Dollars. And my understanding is Musk owns 87% of the remaining shares. I think, I could be wrong, something. It's very high percentage. So that means when everyone says, oh, now he's a trillionaire, well, he's a trillionaire on paper with his shares. Now, he can now go to a bank, and if the bank is foolish enough, and there may be banks that are foolish enough, he can borrow money against those shares. That's why I say he's just created a give or take $1 trillion credit line for himself, uh, with his collateral being uh, his shares of SpaceX. So if the shares go down, whoever was foolish enough to lend him money is going to call him up and do what's called a margin call. And he might just say, hey, I can't meet the margin call. And he'll, quote, lose his shares. Well, I'm happy to lose a mountain of shares if I get to keep a couple of $100 billion. And people might say, well, it's going to ruin his credit rating. If you have several $100 billion in cash, because, he's going to get the loans in cash, um, you don't have to worry about your credit rating, right? So this was brilliant. And tell me, guys, has anybody mentioned this to you in all the news and all the reporting? That's essentially what happened here. That's, the so-called bottom line. Now, what was the story that was being told um, to, to create this value out of thin air? All right. Well, the idea is there's a company, and I have a lot of notes because there's a lot of numbers, and I can't necessarily remember them all. Um, he's claiming, this is Musk, he's got to keep the shares up long enough to get his loans on them, at least, that the company's going to reach $1 trillion in revenue. That's revenue. That's not profits, because my understanding is they lose money every year. So, I could create, you and I could go out and create a business that loses millions of dollars every year. And then I guess we can go to Wall Street, and people will, if our story is good enough, we'll be able to sell a small fraction of the shares, and then the shares that we own are suddenly worth a lot, and then we can go borrow money and live happily ever after. But this company loses $5 billion a year. Um, he is claiming that he's going to get to $1 trillion by when? Oh, just 4 years, 2030. That's 4 years from now, which requires a 53% increase in their revenue. Okay. Now I know the fans are like, yeah, Elon can do it, and God bless you. Uh, it's never been done before in the history. Well, Elon's done many things that have never been done before in the history. Look, he's a great manufacturer. And it's hard to, I mean, wow, I wouldn't be a manufacturer if you literally paid me to do it. It's capital intensive. You got to really produce things. It's not like an ebook, or a teleseminar. This thing better work, or people are going to get really mad. So he's got a lot of cars on the road with Tesla. We've got some Tesla panels. The people that put them up were about 1 degree higher than chimpanzees. Very worrisome, actually. But I guess that's the price of modernity. Now, Elon says it's going to be at $1 trillion in 4 years. The underwriters, that's Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, i.e. crooks, gangsters without guns. Morgan Stanley says it's going to be 330 billion in revenue. Goldman Sachs says it's going to be 474 billion in revenue in 4 years. And since their revenue is basically nada, it's under 20 billion, they basically have to add $300 billion in annual revenue over the next 4 years. And Goldman, with Goldman, it's over 400 million. Okay, all right, I'm game. How are you going to do it? Okay, they got 3 plans, 3 pillars. One is their fabulous Starlink business, which is a pretty good business. 2 is orbital data centers. So if you haven't been following this closely, that's where the juice is. That's where the hype is. Data centers are problematic. They require electricity. They require water. They require political fixing. They require, a whole lot of copper and, all sorts of other metals that are getting more and more expensive and harder to source every day. So if you can put them in space, all your problems go away. That's the logic, guys. It's no smart. It's no slicker than that. The logic is you're going to get all the power you need from solar panels, and you won't have to worry about the heat dispersion because you're in outer space and it's cold up there, and I don't know, you just don't have to worry. But what you do have to do is somehow get that energy from outer space to Earth, which, check me guys, I don't think anybody's figured out how to do yet. Now, I'm all for crazy science. I love it. But if you're basing a business value on something that has never been accomplished, in the history of technology, maybe it shouldn't be a $2 trillion company. Let's figure out how to get the power from orbit to Earth first. The other thing you have to figure out is how you're going to build these things. You know, building a car, amazing. Building a lot of cars, amazing. Not easy, pretty impressive. All right. But now you got to build these never before, because none of these have ever been built. None of these have ever been put into orbit. None of these have ever proven, well, since they've never been built and they've never been in orbit, they've never been proven to work. So this is all literally, it's like I could say, listen, guys, I figured out a way to get to the moon. $10 a seat. We can do it. Just give me $1 trillion. It's a little bit, in that zone there. So that's their second big pillar. And this is going to be, apparently this is going to be huge. It's like saying we've got, wings made out of styrofoam. And if you just stand at the right angle, you'll be able to fly to another country. Hasn't been done yet. But our intrepid bankers, Goldman says, well, that whole market segment is going to $330 billion in 4 years. In 4 years. Well, by the way, you not only have to make these things, which is a process. You also have to get them into space reliably, and you have to do it a lot. Let's look at what they're doing. They're going to just basically be a taxi service to orbit. And for their numbers to work out, are you ready? For their numbers to work out, according to Musk projections, they have to get to the point within 3 years. Are you ready? Did you hear this on CNBC? The projection requires them to do a launch every hour, on the hour, 24 hours a day, a successful launch, which they don't always pull off, every hour, on the hour, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Okay? This is like a train. I mean, it's a great theory. I love it. And he says, I'm going to take the fiction out of science fiction. Okay. I know there's fans. I think he's putting the fiction into his prospectus. Okay. So it's like, well, yeah, but they can do it. They've done it. Well, they've only done it. First of all, they are limited regulatory, and some regulations are good. People that think all government regulations are bad. No, like I don't want someone to open a nuclear waste dump in my next door. Like, regulate that, please. The FAA has said, look, you can do 25 launches a year, no more, and then another 44 from the Kennedy Space Center. So they are allowed to do 69. Well, if their numbers require them to do one an hour, within 3 days they're going to blow through their allotted number of launches. Why are they worried about these launches? Well, they got to bring these things back. That's the other part of the business model. We're not just going to shoot them up into space and lose them. They're going to shoot them up, make their delivery, and bring most of it, not all of it, back and reuse it. There is genuine concern that if something goes wrong, you're going to have tons of material falling into Texas, Florida, Alabama, South Carolina, like very serious amount of stuff, tons of metal falling down. They have one booster that they have reused 25 times, but this is not the same as they have this great, and I can't find the name here, but they have this great projection that they're going to have a new generation of technology that's going to be even more reliable. Well, it's going to be more reliable, but it's also going to be a bigger deal if it crashes and burns. So I see in here that he actually owns 82.4% of the voting shares. Um, yeah. So anyway, these are some notes. Oh, the other thing about Starlink, Starlink's awesome if you're way out in the woods, if you're in an area of the world, it has to be. We're talking about the developing world, where there's no telecommunications infrastructure. If you're out at sea, Starlink's great. But guess what? Um, People that have money generally don't need Starlink because you're living in a suburb, you're living in a city. Even if you're out in the countryside, you probably at this point in most areas you're going to have some telecom connection. So who's going to buy the Starlink? Well, it's intended for maritime, but maritime's already got a lot of what it needs, right? So the market for Starlink, where they're expecting growth, are the poor countries of the world. The problem is the poor countries of the world are poor, and they may or may not be able to afford the Starlink service. So that's just another thing to consider. So bottom line, this has been one of the most, I'm not going to call it a scam. Uh, I won't be judgmental, but basically with nothing more than a story. And by the way, I'm not saying, hey, you should do what Elon does, but basically with nothing more than a story. And this is a story that makes little sense because remember, it's depending on being able to launch and retrieve rockets every hour on the hour, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And to get into orbit, these orbital data centers, which no one has ever built, no one has ever made one work, and no one certainly has ever beamed energy in a useful way down to the world, right? So all of this is pie, it's literally pie in the sky, which is fine. I mean, that's the way things need to come into being. Maybe you can do all these things he's saying. Um, but and you know and those of you who are defenders of him might say, well, he's just created $1 trillion credit line so that he can now spend the money to do these things. Okay, is he going to be able to do them in 4 years? I think that's pretty unrealistic. Is he going to be able to overcome the very reasonable FAA concerns about the reentry of all these rockets? Because if one's going up every hour, there'll be a certain point where they need to be coming back every hour. And I've never seen a reentry. You know, they always, they land these things in the ocean. They land them in Siberia. They're trying to keep them away from people. But you can't do that with the SpaceX model. You can't dump it in the ocean. If you dump it in Siberia or some other Siberia-like place, you got to truck it all the way back. So the logistics here is mind-boggling, and I don't think anybody's calculated, how much metal and copper, how much fuel every hour on the hour, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. A lot of fuel. So anyway, this is something that you and I cannot get away with. We can only watch and marvel at what people are able to do. But bottom line, and I'm really shocked that nobody's mentioned this, basically Elon Musk has created $1 trillion credit card for himself with, the collateral is the value of the stock. So we're going to hear more and more fantastic things from Jim Cramer and CNBC and all the other ridiculous business news outlets. They're going to tell us how realistic all these things are, how wonderful they are. They may be wonderful, but I don't think they're realistic. So anyway, you might have found this interesting or not. You might have learned a few things. I learned a few things when I started looking into it, and I contrasted what I learned with what I saw on the TV, and it was just amazing. Now, where all this leads, I do not know. Um, um, we probably have to do some study on how one lives through an era of mass delusion. But I guess we've been in an era of mass delusion for a long time. That COVID thing was mass delusion on steroids. This is another one. I did a video a little while back which I recommend you look at on the whole AI thing. AI is real. AI is awesome. Um, but be careful. And I didn't really get into it in that video too much. I was more interviewing a guy who talks about the specs of setting up your own AI in your own office, which you can do and you may want to do for a lot of different reasons. But one of the reasons you're going to want to do it is they have to crank up the charge on this, the cost. So if you're dependent, if you're getting increasingly dependent on external services, you're going to be watching that bill going higher and higher and higher. And you might find yourself, really stuck. So check out the other video. I do think we're living in an era of incredible mass delusion. I think the this IPO is extraordinary. I mean, we all have to agree, whether we like it or not, what's just been pulled off. It's extraordinary and unprecedented in human history. That's pretty hard to do. So anyway, see you around. Hope everything's going well. We're good here, and talk to you later.